When we're talking about feeling like an alien or why we just feel so different from other people, I felt like it was important to talk about reasons why we can feel so different and to really be able to hear it in a way that validates what you feel, but also maybe points you in a direction for support and healing, and also tells you that some things are just part of who you are, right? But as I shared the idea of like always feeling different, like I came from another planet, it's been something that I just thought everyone felt. And I do think that most people on a spectrum of like comfort with who they are and how they fit in or not have some feelings of this. So I don't believe it's a, binary thing, you do or you don't. But here are some reasons why you might feel that way. Number one, trauma. So trauma creates new ways of engaging with ourselves in the world and new patterns in our brains. It creates, a difference. So like if I had a childhood where my parents were married and they never really fought and it was a safe attachment, and you had parents who divorced and maybe you had to live in different homes, even if they got along generally well, just the nature of that difference can give us a sense of other than. But certainly, whether it's single event traumas and a PTSD trauma or relational trauma, can give us a sense or feeling of my world is different or I am different than you. Number two, obviously, all kinds of underlying mental health and physical health issues. I've shared a bit that my daughter has autoimmune and I do, and just the nature of how much she can miss school. There's like this feeling of why are you not here, or why do you get to stay home on this day or that day. And it's been one of those things where every single year since she was in kindergarten she missed at least a month of school, and in some years more, depending upon hospital visits and things like that. But if you have an underlying condition like ADHD, for example, maybe you're really reactive or impulsive or hyperactive, and that can feel differing, especially if it's not managed well for you or let's say in the classroom. Obviously, like I said, physical health. So maybe you have diabetes, maybe you have to take medication, things like that. Number three, developmental differences, like I just mentioned. So certainly things like autism, ADHD, neurological dynamics that we are not even always sure, where they began from and different issues. But just the way your brain works and processes information might just fundamentally be different. The way you learn, all of those things, the way you process information, how you respond to sensory issues, how you communicate, all of that. Number four, having a harsh inner critic, and that would certainly be related to trauma. And so if you have a lot of negative self-talk, whether it's, gosh, why did you say that? Or you're so stupid, what were you thinking? That others you into like there's something wrong with you. And we know that inner critics and outer critics are very common within complex PTSD. But if you have a very harsh, like this judge hanging over you that's always like, why did you do that or whatever, that gives you a space of feeling like, well, everyone else gets it right and there's something wrong or different about me. The next one is you might just be in the wrong environment, the wrong friend group, the wrong situation in general. So sometimes we find ourselves in friend groups that we maybe wouldn't have chosen. This happens a lot when kids are younger and they're in the same classrooms. And so they kind of form these little groups, but oftentimes as the kids grow, their interests change. Their separate selves become more and more apparent. And so people can feel guilty like, oh, I love this friend, but we have nothing in common anymore, things like that. It could be the environment. I grew up in a place where I just always wanted to live near the ocean. It was just a passion of mine. I just felt like it was like a calling since I was a little girl. And growing up in a very landlocked environment, I knew when I left home at 18 that I was not going to stay there and raise a family or even live there. And so sometimes though, when you're in it, you can't necessarily get away from it. So it just might be that the weather, the geography, the people are just not the best fit for you, but in that moment you can't change it. Certainly having narcissistic parents, eggshell, I've talked about parents who are super unpredictable and inconsistent. It could be about the lack of safety. It could be about parents, let's say narcissistic parents who tell you how great you are when you're doing all the things that they value. And so you think that your worth or your commonality is when you're special in some way. And so when you're not, you feel other than. So if you get a B, there's something wrong with that, right? It has to be a straight A, and then you align with all the straight A kids. But maybe deep inside, that's not really who you are. You're just doing it because you're good at it, or because you think that's where you find value. So that can make you feel like, what's wrong with me? I'm different. The next one is introversion and general sensitivity to the environment. So certainly if you're more introverted and you found yourself, let's say, in a friend group where they're extroverted and you don't really get that, or they shame you for wanting to stay home more or do more isolated activities that are more self-regulating, that can make you feel like something's different about you. Going through life transitions, I've talked about divorce. I think there's a big split between working parents and stay-at-home parents, kids who have parents who are divorced. I have personally noticed that in my own kid friend groups, many of them would sort of like connect to kids who had divorced parents over time. There's a certain understanding that you have that you don't necessarily get if you don't have the experience. And so if you're the only child whose parents are divorced in the married friend group, that can give you a sense of feeling like there's something wrong with me, but there's nothing wrong with you. It's just your circumstances are different. So of course there are many other reasons, but the idea is that you don't pathologize or blame or shame yourself in situations where you just happen to find yourself, or just how your brain is, or the way you are, that, as cliche as it sounds, that you try to lean into actually finding more people, more situations, more locations, more dynamics that let you be more of who you are. There's nothing wrong or bad or weird about you, but sometimes there are things that we don't necessarily take into account that feed that sense of like, what is different about me? And as I've said, it could truly be all the way from the way that you came out of the womb to the town you find yourself living in. So what can help? Certainly awareness, being, just trying to be like loving and gentle with yourself when you make these connections. And maybe you say, well, I can't leave now, but someday I'm going to work on this, moving somewhere here that feels more in line with my heart, my soul, whatever it is. Doing therapy can be helpful because maybe the difference, the underlying alien feeling is about something that needs more support or accommodation or treatment, or just an understanding. Doing inner child work and sort of honoring what you feel and who you are, and just trying to work on accepting more of who you are. Changing how you respond emotionally to these like shame dynamics, if it's about other or alien equals bad, to try to do that exploratory work, to try to understand, and then not letting yourself spiral into different equals bad. It's just different. Obviously trying to look at yourself and find the qualities that you actually are proud of that make you you and you different, instead of saying I'm just other, to find ways to acknowledge, to lean into potentially like-minded people and community ideally. As I've done this deep dive into autism, I'm realizing how difficult it would be, and the research is showing that people that have more neurodiverse brains tend to do, potentially make better connections with those who have similar differences. And so maybe it's about some passion, some hobby, trying to, instead of just like meeting people in, the most average places, let's say like a dinner club or a gym, you go, no, I'm going to go to a crocheting club because I like that kind of a thing. And you go with the intention of finding something for you, and then the secondary benefit being that you can find, like-minded connections. Obviously, research and self-reflection can be very helpful. So trying to understand, if you say, yeah, I did have really narcissistic parents or a parent, and I do notice that I'm driven to be successful and I feel bad or different when I don't, trying to understand that more and doing healing work. If you think you might have some type of neurodivergence, doing some work and reading and research on that, which, as I'm learning, is that particular one is quite large, just within the community, let alone outside. Or if it's physical health, maybe you want to change something and work on yourself, and so you try to find a support group and you do those things. So it's important to know that, I think it's a relatively common experience, like I said in the beginning, on a spectrum of feeling different, but there really can be reasons why. And if you have this feeling and it doesn't bother you, that's fine, like who cares? But if you've always felt other than or different than, And of course, this can be society and culture and political dynamics. Like, there are so many reasons why we might other certain communities where it's not just you feeling that way, you're being judged or shamed for that. That is not your problem. That is their problem, but that also can be very hurtful. So I just want to acknowledge that. But I think it's important to try to find ways to figure out and discover. I think that's the whole journey of self-learning and awareness, and to lean in more and more to the parts of yourself that you love and that you want to love more, and the parts you want to work on and heal, and the parts that just need you, that are just patiently waiting for you to accept them for who they are, for what they are, from the interior world to your exterior world. So those are some reasons. I love to hear your thoughts, and I'm sure there are many more. Thank you so much for being here. Please stay safe and well, and I'll see you soon. Bye.